When my daughter Sarah invited me to live with her and her husband in their beautiful home outside Atlanta, I thought I'd finally have the peaceful retirement I'd earned after 40 years at the factory. But every night at exactly 2:15 a.m., I'd hear strange sounds coming from the basement. One night, I decided to investigate, and what I discovered about my perfect son-in-law shattered everything I believed about my family. Drop a comment below, letting me know where you're watching from. And tell me, would you have had the courage to go down those basement stairs in the middle of the night? The phone call came on a Tuesday afternoon while I was sitting alone in my empty house in rural Ohio. At 66, I'd grown accustomed to silence since my wife Eleanor passed 3 years ago. The house felt too big, too quiet, filled with memories that both comforted and haunted me. "Dad, we need to talk about something important." Sarah's voice carried that gentle insistence I'd known since she was a little girl, asking for one more bedtime story. "What's on your mind, sweetheart?" "Marcus and I have been discussing this for months. We want you to come live with us. The house has that beautiful guest suite on the main floor, and I worry about you being alone up there in Ohio." I looked around my living room at Eleanor's china cabinet, the worn recliner where I'd spent countless evenings, the kitchen where she'd taught Sarah to make her grandmother's apple pie. "Sarah, I appreciate the thought, but I'm doing fine here." "Dad, you're not fine. You're isolated. When was the last time you had a real conversation with someone besides the checkout clerk at the grocery store?" Her words stung because they were true. Since retiring from the automotive plant where I'd spent 4 decades as a foreman, my social circle had shrunk to almost nothing. Old colleagues had moved away or passed on. The church friends Eleanor and I had shared seemed uncomfortable around a widower, unsure what to say. Marcus appeared on the line, his smooth voice radiating confidence. "Walter, we've got plenty of room. Sarah misses you terribly, and honestly, I could use another man around the house. Someone to watch the Braves games with." I'd always appreciated Marcus. When Sarah brought him home 8 years ago, I'd been impressed by his success as a financial advisor, his easy charm, the way he looked at my daughter like she was the most precious thing in the world. They'd married 5 years later in a beautiful ceremony that Eleanor had helped plan before her diagnosis. "Think about it, Dad," Sarah added. "Just come for a visit first. If you hate it, you can always go back." 2 weeks later, I found myself driving south on I-75. My truck loaded with the possessions I couldn't bear to leave behind. The rest I'd put in storage, telling myself this was temporary, a trial run. The house exceeded every expectation. A sprawling colonial in a gated community called Magnolia Heights, with manicured lawns and neighbors who waved from their morning jogs. Marcus met me in the circular driveway, helping unload boxes with genuine enthusiasm. "Welcome home, Walter," he said, clapping my shoulder. "Sarah's been decorating your suite for weeks. I think she's more excited than when we bought this place." My quarters occupied the entire east wing of the main floor, a spacious bedroom, private bathroom, and sitting area with French doors opening onto the garden. Sarah had chosen warm colors and comfortable furniture, even hanging some of Eleanor's landscape paintings she'd kept after the funeral. "Dad, do you like it?" Sarah stood in the doorway, her expression hopeful and anxious, looking so much like her mother that my heart clenched. "It's perfect, sweetheart. Everything's perfect." And for those first weeks, it truly was. I woke each morning to the smell of fresh coffee and Sarah's humming in the kitchen. She'd taken after Eleanor in her love of cooking, preparing elaborate breakfasts that reminded me of Sunday mornings from decades past. Marcus left early for his downtown office, always impeccably dressed, always pausing to kiss Sarah goodbye and shake my hand. "Your daughter's the best thing that ever happened to me, Walter. I hope you know I'll spend my life making her happy." The neighborhood embraced me with southern hospitality I hadn't expected. Frank Patterson, a retired Atlanta police detective who lived 3 houses down, became my regular walking companion. We'd circle the community each morning, discussing everything from fishing to politics to the Braves pitching rotation. "Your son-in-law's quite the success story," Frank mentioned one morning. "Handles investments for half the folks in Magnolia Heights. My wife Linda swears by him." "He's been good to Sarah," I agreed. "That's what matters most to me." Evenings brought family dinners where Marcus would share stories from his day, new clients he'd acquired, investment strategies he'd developed, the satisfaction of helping people secure their financial futures. "There's nothing more rewarding than knowing you've protected someone's retirement," he'd say, refilling my wine glass. "Especially the elderly clients who've worked their whole lives and deserve security." I found myself nodding along, grateful that Sarah had married someone with such integrity. But as the third week began, subtle wrongness crept into my awareness like shadows at dusk. It started with Sarah's laughter, or rather, its absence. The bright, musical sound I'd known since her childhood had faded to something quieter, more careful. She still smiled, still maintained her routines, but something behind her eyes had dimmed. "You okay, sweetheart?" I asked one afternoon, finding her staring out the kitchen window at nothing. She startled as if I'd caught her doing something forbidden. "Of course, Dad. Just tired. I haven't been sleeping well lately." I noticed other things. The way she flinched when Marcus's car pulled into the driveway. How she double-checked every detail of dinner preparation, adjusting seasonings and presentation with almost frantic precision. The long sleeves she wore despite George's warmth. One morning, I passed the master bedroom and heard Marcus's voice through the door, low, controlled, but carrying an edge that made my stomach tighten. "I told you to have that report ready. How many times do we need to discuss your responsibilities?" Sarah's response was barely audible. "I'm sorry. I'll do better." "You always say that." I moved away quickly, not wanting to eavesdrop further, telling myself every marriage had its tensions. Then came the basement sounds. The first night, I dismissed it as house-settling old homes had their quirks. But at exactly 2:15 a.m., something had pulled me from sleep. A muffled thump, followed by what might have been voices. I lay in darkness, listening, but heard nothing more. The second night, same time, 2:15. More distinct this time, footsteps, a door closing, then silence. By the fifth night, I'd started setting my alarm for 2, lying awake in anticipation. The pattern never varied. 2:15 a.m. Sounds from below, lasting perhaps 20 minutes before the house fell silent again. "Everything all right?" I asked Marcus over breakfast. "I've been hearing some noises at night. Thought maybe you had a critter problem in the basement." Marcus's coffee cup paused halfway to his lips. "Noises? Around 2 in the morning. Sounds like footsteps, maybe some thumping." He laughed, but something flickered behind his smile. "Old house sounds, Walter. The HVAC system cycles around that time, makes the ductwork expand and contract. I've been meaning to have it serviced." Sarah stood at the stove, her back rigid, focused intently on scrambled eggs that needed no attention. "I probably should stay out of your basement anyway," I continued, watching Marcus's reaction. "Don't want to intrude on your space." "Actually," Marcus said, his tone casual but firm, "I keep client files down there. Sensitive financial documents. I'd appreciate if you didn't go poking around. Professional liability, you understand." "Of course," I said. "I completely understand." But I didn't understand. I'd spent 40 years managing a factory floor, supervising hundreds of workers, solving problems that ranged from mechanical failures to personnel conflicts. I knew when something was wrong, even when I couldn't name it. And something in this beautiful house was very, very wrong. 2 weeks into my suspicions, I made my first real discovery. Marcus had left for a weekend conference in Nashville, some financial planning seminar that would keep him away until Monday. Sarah seemed lighter in his absence, her old laughter occasionally surfacing during our conversations. That Saturday afternoon, she ran to the grocery store, leaving me alone in the house for the first time. I told myself I was just curious, just an old man's paranoia, but my feet carried me to the basement door before my conscience could object. The stairs descended into darkness. I found the light switch and navigated carefully, my knees protesting each step. The basement was finished but sparse concrete floor, industrial shelving, a desk with a computer in one corner, and file cabinets. 4 large metal cabinets lined one wall, each secured with combination locks. The desk drawers were unlocked. Inside, I found what appeared to be client folders' names, addresses, account numbers, investment summaries. Normal enough for a financial advisor. But one folder caught my attention. It was thicker than the others, labeled simply prospects in Marcus's neat handwriting. Inside were profiles of elderly people from throughout the Atlanta area. Each page included photographs, estimated net worth, family situations, and handwritten notes in margins. Widow. No close family nearby. Estimated estate, $850K. Approached at church fundraiser. Seemed receptive to free consultation. Widower. Early dementia signs per daughter. Assets primarily in municipal bonds. Daughter lives in California. Minimal oversight. Retired teacher. Husband deceased 2019. Pension plus investments approximately $400K. Lonely responds well to personal attention. My hands trembled as I flipped through page after page. Dozens of profiles, all following the same pattern. Vulnerable elderly people, assessed like targets, their isolation and trust weaponized against them. Then I found my own file. Walter Brennan, 66, widower, wife deceased 2021, retired factory foreman, pension estimated $3,200, month plus savings approximately $180K. Moved in June, establishing trust phase. Target timeline, 6 to 8 months for full access. The room spun. I gripped the desk edge, fighting nausea as the implications crashed over me. My perfect son-in-law hadn't invited me into his home out of love or family duty. He'd assessed me, planned me, scheduled my exploitation like a business project. Establishing trust phase. I photographed everything with my phone, the prospect files, my own profile, client folders that now seemed sinister rather than professional. Then I replaced everything exactly as I'd found it and climbed those stairs on legs that barely supported me. Sarah returned an hour later, grocery bags in hand, that fragile smile on her face. "Did you have a nice afternoon, Dad?" I looked at my daughter, really looked, and saw what I'd been missing. The careful way she moved, always aware of her surroundings, the exhaustion that makeup couldn't hide. The fading bruise I'd glimpsed on her upper arm when her sleeve shifted while reaching for a high shelf. My little girl was trapped in something terrible, and she'd been too afraid or ashamed to tell me. "Everything was fine, sweetheart," I said, helping her unpack groceries. Just a quiet afternoon. But as I watched her work, my heart hardening with resolve, I knew that quiet afternoons were over. I'd spent 40 years solving problems and protecting people on my factory floor. Now I had one more job to do. I approached Frank Patterson the next morning during our walk, waiting until we'd reached the far end of the neighborhood where no one could overhear. "Frank, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me." The retired detective's expression sharpened. He'd spent 30 years reading people, and he read me now. "What's going on, Walter? What do you know about Marcus?" "Really know?" Frank was quiet for a long moment. "Linda and I have wondered," he finally said. "Little things that don't add up. He manages investments for several folks here in Magnolia Heights. The returns he promises seem almost too good. Have you checked his credentials?" "I made some calls last month," Frank admitted. "His license is valid, but there are gaps in his professional history, years unaccounted for. And I heard through old department contacts that the Georgia Securities Division has received complaints about advisors matching his profile." "What kind of complaints?" "Elder financial abuse, targeting vulnerable seniors, gaining their trust, then systematically draining their assets through unauthorized transactions, or convincing them to sign over power of attorney." My stomach clenched. I showed Frank the photographs on my phone, watching his face harden with each image. "Walter, this is serious. This is criminal." "There's more," I said. "I think he's hurting Sarah. I've seen bruises, heard arguments through doors. She's scared of him, Frank. My little girl is terrified in her own house." Frank's hand gripped my shoulder. "We need to be smart about this. Men like Marcus, they're charming and connected, and very good at making accusers look crazy. If we move too fast, he'll destroy evidence and probably escalate with Sarah. What do we suggest? We build an airtight case, document everything, get professionals involved, and we make sure Sarah is safe when everything falls apart." That afternoon, while Marcus was at work, I sat Sarah down in my suite. I closed the French doors, checked that we were truly alone, and took my daughter's hands in mine. "Sweetheart, I need to ask you something, and I need you to tell me the truth. Is Marcus hurting you?" Her face crumbled. The mask she'd maintained for years, maybe for our entire relationship, finally shattered. "Dad," she whispered, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I wanted to tell you. So many times, I wanted to tell you. But he said no one would believe me. He said he'd destroy me, destroy my reputation, make sure I never saw you again." "How long?" "Since before the wedding. Small things at first. Criticisms that seemed like concern. Then controlling the money, monitoring my phone, telling me what to wear and who to talk to. The first time he hit me was our honeymoon." "Oh, Sarah." She collapsed into my arms, sobbing the way she had as a child when the world overwhelmed her. I held my daughter and felt something cold and certain settle into my chest. "I'm going to fix this," I promised. "We're going to fix this together." Sarah pulled back, wiping her eyes. "Dad, you don't understand. He has cameras in some rooms. He tracks my location. He checks my phone every night. If he finds out I've talked to you, then we make sure he doesn't find out." I told her about the basement files, about my conversation with Frank, about the evidence I'd already gathered. "And I need to know, is there anything else? Anything you've seen or heard that could help us?" Sarah's expression shifted from despair to something harder. "There's a safe in his office closet. I've seen him put documents in there, things he doesn't want anyone to find. And he meets someone every month, a woman named Patricia. They have lunch downtown, and he's always nervous afterward." We spent the next 3 weeks building our case with meticulous care. Frank connected me with Detective Angela Morrison from the Atlanta PD Financial Crimes Unit. She'd been investigating similar complaints about advisors in affluent communities, and Marcus's name had already appeared in her files. "Mr. Brennan," she told me during a clandestine meeting at a coffee shop far from Magnolia Heights, "what you're describing fits a pattern we've been tracking for 2 years. Your son-in-law may be part of a larger network targeting elderly victims." I shared everything: photographs, Sarah's testimony, the patterns I'd observed. Detective Morrison's team began their own surveillance, documenting Marcus's meetings with the mysterious Patricia, who turned out to be a paralegal specializing in elder law documents. "She helps him obtain power of attorney over clients," Morrison explained. "Sometimes legitimately, sometimes through forged signatures. Once he has legal control, he systematically drains their accounts." Meanwhile, Sarah played her role perfectly. She maintained her careful routine, gave Marcus no reason for suspicion, and secretly documented every bruise, every threat, every controlling behavior. She hid a small recorder in her purse, capturing conversations that revealed Marcus's contempt for his victims. "The old fool actually thanked me last week," Marcus's voice sneered through the playback. "Thanked me for taking such good care of his retirement. By the time he realizes what happened, there won't be anything left to fight over." "Who was he talking about?" "Mr. Henderson," Sarah said quietly. "He's 82, lives alone since his wife passed. Marcus visits him every week, brings him groceries, calls himself the son Henderson never had. The same pattern, the same predatory playbook. My son-in-law had perfected the art of seeming like a blessing while being a curse." The hardest moment came when I discovered Marcus had already begun his operation against me. Frank's detective contacts uncovered documents filed with the county probate court, a petition for emergency guardianship over Walter Brennan, citing concerns about cognitive decline and financial vulnerability. The petition included statements from a doctor, Richard Yamamoto, a geriatric specialist who claimed to have examined me. "I've never met any Dr. Yamamoto," I told Detective Morrison. "We know," she said. "He's been disciplined twice for signing evaluations without proper examination. He's part of the network." "They were going to declare me incompetent," I said, the words tasting like ash. "Take control of my pension, my savings, everything Eleanor and I built together." "They've done it before," Morrison confirmed. "At least 4 other cases we've linked to this network. Elderly people who lost everything and couldn't fight back because the system had already labeled them incapable." I thought about those victims, people like me, like Mr. Henderson, like the names in Marcus's prospect files. People who'd worked their entire lives, trusted the wrong person, and lost everything. "When do we move?" "Soon," Morrison said. We're coordinating with the Securities Division and the DA's office. When we take him down, we take down the whole network. The operation was scheduled for a Friday evening, timed to coincide with Marcus's return from another supposed business trip. Sarah had packed a bag and moved it secretly to Frank's house. A room at a domestic violence shelter was reserved under a false name. Every contingency had been planned. But Marcus came home a day early. I was in my suite when I heard his car in the driveway, 12 hours ahead of schedule. Through my window, I watched him stride toward the house, with an expression I'd never seen before, cold fury barely contained. "Sarah!" His voice echoed through the house. "Sarah, where are you?" She emerged from the kitchen, and even from my doorway, I could see her fear. "Marcus, I wasn't expecting. I got a very interesting call today," he interrupted, "from Dr. Yamamoto. Apparently, someone's been asking questions about examinations I never requested. I don't understand. Don't lie to me." His hand shot out, gripping her arm, yanking her close. "What have you been doing? Who have you been talking to?" I stepped into the hallway. "Let her go, Marcus." He spun toward me, still gripping Sarah. She winced, but stayed silent. "This doesn't concern you, Walter. Go back to your room." "It concerns me when you put your hands on my daughter." Something shifted in his face, the charming mask slipping completely, revealing the predator beneath. "You should have stayed in Ohio, old man. You should have died alone in that empty house like you were supposed to." "I know about the files," I said calmly. "The prospect profiles in your basement. My file. The network you've built to steal from vulnerable people." Marcus's grip on Sarah tightened. She cried out in pain. "You don't know anything," he hissed. "You're a confused old man with dementia. Everyone will believe that. Everyone already believes that." I pulled out my phone, showing him the screen. "Detective Morrison, did you get all that?" Her voice came through the speaker, clear and steady. "Every word, Mr. Brennan. Units are 2 minutes out." Marcus's face contorted with rage. He shoved Sarah aside and lunged toward me, but 40 years of managing dangerous machinery and volatile workers had taught me to anticipate. I sidestepped, and he crashed into the wall. Sirens cut through the evening air. Blue lights flashed through the windows. Sarah scrambled away from Marcus as he struggled to his feet. "You did this," he snarled at her. "After everything I gave you, you gave me nothing but fear," she said, her voice stronger than I'd heard in years. "You took everything and called it love." The front door burst open. Detective Morrison and 4 uniformed officers flooded into the house. "Marcus Wilson, you're under arrest for elder abuse, fraud, forgery, and assault. You have the right to remain silent." As they cuffed him, Marcus looked at me with pure hatred. "This isn't over." I met his gaze without flinching. "Yes, it is." They led him away in handcuffs, and Sarah collapsed into my arms, shaking but free. The trial took place 8 months later, in Fulton County Superior Court. The prosecution presented evidence from 17 separate victims, elderly people Marcus had manipulated, deceived, and robbed. Total losses exceeded $2.3 million. The network he'd built included Dr. Yamamoto, the paralegal Patricia Vance, and 2 other financial advisors who'd used similar methods in different Atlanta suburbs. I testified about what I'd witnessed, what I'd discovered, and how close I'd come to losing everything. But the most powerful moment came when Sarah took the stand. She described years of abuse, physical, emotional, financial. She explained how Marcus had isolated her from friends and family, controlled every aspect of her life, and threatened to destroy her if she ever tried to leave. "I stayed because I believed no one would help me," she said, her voice steady despite her tears. "I stayed because he convinced me I was worthless. But my father showed me that wasn't true. He showed me that someone would fight for me, even when I couldn't fight for myself." Judge Patricia Williams delivered the sentence with visible contempt for the defendant. "Mr. Wilson, you systematically preyed on the most vulnerable members of our community. You violated sacred trusts, destroyed lives, and showed no remorse for your actions. This court sentences you to 12 years in federal prison, with no possibility of parole for the first 8 years. You will make full restitution to all victims." Marcus was led away without looking back. Outside the courthouse, Mr. Henderson, the 82-year-old widower Marcus, had been grooming, shook my hand with tears in his eyes. "You saved me, Mr. Brennan. If you hadn't spoken up, I'd have lost everything my wife and I spent our lives building." "I just did what anyone would do," I said. "No," Frank Patterson corrected, standing nearby with his wife, Linda. "You did what most people are afraid to do. You paid attention, you asked questions, and you didn't let a charming facade blind you to the truth." 6 months after the trial, Sarah and I found ourselves in an unexpected place, a small house in Savannah, Georgia, with a wraparound porch and a garden that needed tending. She'd sold the Atlanta house, wanting no memories of her years with Marcus. The divorce had been finalized quickly, given his criminal conviction, and when she'd asked if I wanted to start over somewhere new, I'd realized I had nothing holding me to Ohio anymore. "Dad," she called from the kitchen, where something wonderful was cooking. "Come see what I made." I settled into my chair on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. Eleanor would have loved this view. She would have loved seeing Sarah finally free, finally becoming the woman she was meant to be. The screen door creaked, and Sarah appeared with 2 plates of her grandmother's apple pie. "I've been thinking," she said, settling into the chair beside me, "about everything that happened, about how close we came to losing everything." "What have you been thinking?" "That God works in mysterious ways. If you hadn't moved in with us, if you hadn't heard those sounds at night, if you hadn't been brave enough to investigate, Marcus would still be out there, still hurting people, still hurting me." I reached over and took her hand. Sometimes I wonder why I was the one who had to see the truth, why it couldn't have been someone else, someone younger, someone with more resources. "Because you were the right person, Dad." She squeezed my fingers. "You spent 40 years protecting workers on your factory floor who depended on you. When you retired, you didn't stop being that person. You just found new people who needed protection." We sat in comfortable silence, watching the day fade into evening. Fireflies began their nightly dance across the lawn, tiny lights flickering like promises. "You know what I realized?" Sarah said eventually. "Age doesn't make us weaker, it makes us wiser. Marcus underestimated you because he thought being older meant being vulnerable. He didn't understand that being older means having seen more, survived more, learned more. Your mother used to say something similar." I smiled, remembering Eleanor's gentle wisdom. "She said gray hair was just proof that you'd outsmarted life long enough to earn it." Sarah laughed, that bright, musical sound I'd missed for so many years. "I'm going to remember that." Looking back on everything that happened, I've come to understand something important about family and betrayal, and the courage it takes to face uncomfortable truths. When I first moved to Atlanta, I was an old man looking for peace. I found something better: purpose. The chance to save my daughter, to protect vulnerable people I'd never met, to prove that predators can't always win. Stories like mine are more common than anyone wants to admit. There are people out there right now, sitting in beautiful houses, married to charming spouses, being slowly destroyed by someone who was supposed to love them. There are elderly folks being assessed and targeted and exploited by people who see age as weakness. But age isn't weakness. Experience isn't vulnerability. The years we've lived have taught us to recognize when something's wrong, even when we can't immediately name it. God gives us instincts for a reason. If something feels wrong in your family, pay attention, ask questions, trust yourself. Don't let anyone, no matter how charming, how successful, how convincing, make you doubt what you know in your heart. And if you're trapped in something terrible, believing no one can help you, you're wrong. Someone out there is paying attention. Someone cares enough to fight for you. Sometimes that someone is a 66-year-old factory foreman with bad knees and too much time on his hands. Sometimes salvation comes from unexpected places. If my story resonated with you, please share it with someone who might need to hear it. Leave a comment below about your own experiences, your own observations, your own concerns about family members who might need help. And remember, getting older doesn't mean getting weaker. It means getting wiser. It means having the perspective to see what others miss and the courage to act when action is needed. Thank you for listening to my story. God bless you all, and watch out for each other. That's what family, real family, is supposed to do.